everyone, welcome back. Here we're going to continue our weather app with React, and so far we've got the app functioning, right? I have it here. We created our weather component and I have the app running in my browser right here. Maybe we should add some styles. So this looks okay, but it could look a lot better. Let's try and improve on it. A typical pattern when using React is to style your components with a style sheet that matches the name of the component. And this is a feature of the Create React starter code. So the regular React stuff doesn't do this automatically, but if you use the Create React starter boilerplate code, it comes with a Webpack system that will load your CSS files. So if it sees CSS files, it'll automatically load them into a component. It'll also work with SCSS files. So if you create a Sass file, you can load those too, okay? So let's do a little bit of styling here. So the first thing I need to do is I want to put this form in the middle of the page, like vertically, right? So if you look here, they've already set their components up with a CSS file. So you can see I've got a CSS file here for index.js and a CSS file for app.js, right? So we'll make one for weather.js in a moment, but let's do a little bit of work in index and app, okay? Quick note, if we inspect the React project in the browser and we look at the inspector here, let me make this like a little bit bigger so we can see it there, right? So if we look at this, the structure that React is creating is a body tag with a div called root. And all of the things that we create are going to be inside root. So you can see this app here that says class name app. That div is the div that's created here in app.js, okay? And the root element, div root right there, is created in index. Or actually not in index, it's actually in this public folder, but the public folder is actually getting that element, or I mean in index, it's getting the element by its ID name right here, right, which is in this index HTML, right? So we can see it over here, right? So to get our stuff to sit in the middle, like it pays to kind of understand the structure there, right? So now that we kind of know what's going on there, how are we going to get our app to be in the middle? Well, if I hover over the body tag, you'll see the blue area is collapsed. It's only as tall as the content, right? So it has no height. So what I have to do is I have to make sure that the body tag expands to fill the entire page. And that actually means that the HTML tag needs to do that too. So I'm going to put these styles in index CSS. It seems like a logical place for them, okay? I'm going to leave these default styles in there. These just set some basic font family stuff, and I actually kind of like the font that they chose, so I'm going to keep that, okay? And what I'm going to do in here is I'm going to add another rule for body, comma, HTML, and I'm going to set the height to 100%, okay? And when I do that, it should reload the page. And when I hover over the HTML tag, you can see I see blue everywhere, and so the HTML tag is filling the browser window. And when I hover over the body tag, same thing, okay? But if I get to this div called root down here, this guy doesn't fill the entire page. So we have to make sure that that fills the entire page. So I'm going to go to index CSS again, and I'm going to add a rule for hashtag root. Okay, and I'll say you are going to be height 100%, right? And actually, if we're going to do this, we might as well just put the hashtag root up here. So I'm going to say root, you're going to just share this height 100% rule, okay? So we'll save that, and now when I go to the browser, you can see HTML fills the entire page, height 100%, body, height 100%, div, root is height 100%. And when I look at app though, app is not height 100%. So we got to get app to be 100%, right? So now let's go to our app.js. So app.js imports app CSS, and so we can put our style sheets here in app CSS. So there's a bunch of styles in here. I think I'm going to get rid of all of these. So let me actually get rid of, I'm just going to get rid of everything except for app right here, okay? And then I'm going to get rid of that text align center too. So now my form is going to be over here, but that's okay. So we're going to fix that too. So let's go to app, and we're going to say, you guessed it, height 100%. Okay, I'm putting this here because these rules will apply to app, and this app is importing that CSS file. So all the rules here logically should apply to this element, right? Let's take a look. So if I look at app now, it's height 100%. So now we're in business, right? Okay. So now we can try and move this weather div into the middle of the page. So let's try this now. I'm going to go back to app here, and I'm going to say display flex. Okay. And then what I want to do is say justify content center, okay, and that should move the form horizontally to the center of the page. So that's looking pretty good. But now I want to move it vertically to the center. So flex works on two axes, right? Two axes. And by default, the axis is horizontal. So this center applies along this justify content center applies along the horizontal axis, like across here, left to right, okay? To do the cross axis, which would be up and down in our case, we're going to say align items center, okay? And by doing that, now I've got this in the middle of the page there, right? And if I close this bottom, it'll always be, it'll always be in the center, depending on where, depending on the height of the page, right? So that's looking pretty good. Okay, so now our next step is to style the form elements, right? And the form elements, they belong to weather.js. So let's create a new style sheet and use that and apply that to all the component, so the weather component and all the things in there, right? So I'm going to make a brand new file, and I'll name it after the component, but call it .css instead of JS. So I put .css here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a look at weather.js and notice that I have this class name weather right here. So this is the name I'm going to use, whatever name you put here, right? And so I'll do .weather, and we'll put a style on here. So this .weather is the container div here, and then inside the container I have a form and then an input and a button. Okay, so let's try it out. So maybe I'm not going to style the outer container, but maybe what I'll do is I'll say weather space input, and this will style the input element, right? So let's say for the input element, I like to have let's do a border of 1 pixel solid. Okay, so now it should have a border there. Oh, we got to do one more thing. I'm not seeing my border, right? So let's go to our weather.js, and we're going to import our style sheet. I actually left this import from app CSS. Let's change that. We're in the weather component, right? So take a note there, right? And let's change this app to weather, okay? Oh, there we go. Now we got our border, right? So our style sheet is being loaded. So let's also say, let's give this some padding. So I like to add a little space around the text inside the input. So let's do padding of, let's do 0.5 em, right? And a little bit of space. Let's give it a border radius of, let's do 0.25 em, not too much there. And then let's also set the font size. So the font size on inputs and buttons is actually less than 1 em. It's a little bit smaller than the standard size. So I'm going to change the font size to 1 em. And then you'll see it gets a little bigger. So I feel like that's a good size if someone was going to input their zip. It'd be pretty clear what they were typing, right? So that looks pretty good. Let's borrow some of these rules and apply them to the button. Okay, so I think the button there is going to use the same rules, and we could share it, but I think just to make this less confusing is I'll just copy all this and change this to button. So now button gets all the same rules. So that actually looks pretty good. Maybe let's change a few of the styles. So I think I'm going to do margin 0. You saw this button, it scooted a little bit here, and then this guy has a little bit of margin on this side, so I want to put them where they're both together. So I think I'm going to do margin 0 here. Oh, now they're close together. And I think what I'd like to do is take out the rounded corners here and here, right? So the border radius lets you set a corner radius for each of the 4 corners. Like this, if you just have one value, it does all 4 corners. But if we want to do each corner, we can put 4 values there. The first corner, the first value represents the corner in the upper left. So on this one, I want the upper left to be 0.25. The upper right's going to be 0. That's this one. The lower right, it goes around clockwise, is going to be 0. And then the lower left will be 0.25m. Okay? Oh yeah, so now I got 2 square corners here and 2 round ones there. And then I want to do the same thing but the opposite for the button. Try that on your own. You can stop the video and see if you can do that on your own, right? Okay, so how did you do? Okay, so remember the first corner is the upper left, right? So that one's going to be 0 in this case. And then the upper right will be 2.5. And then the next one, the lower right, will be 0.25m. And then the last one is the lower left, and that'll be 0. So that doesn't look too bad there, right? Okay, and maybe let's change the background color on the button a little bit here. Maybe I'll do this. I'll say background color is, let's do like a really dark gray, okay? And then we'll do a color for the text, and let's make it like a really light gray. So we'll do EEE, how about like that, right? That doesn't look too bad. This doesn't quite look the right size now, and that's because the border inherits the color from the text. So the border is now like the super light gray, almost white, and so this looks a little smaller because the border seems to be missing, right? So what we'll do is we'll just borrow this color here and we'll add that color onto the border. Okay, so now the border shows up again. So that actually looks pretty good now. Okay, so I think we're good with our styles. Let's stop the video here and then we'll make a new video, and in the next video we'll continue and we'll start getting our weather data working. Okay, so thanks for watching.